Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Non-profit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use.
Welcome to the Ear Mob Podcast. I am your host, Chaz Stumbo. All right, everybody. This is the first time that I'm using Restream, so this will be interesting, but it's going to be a good show today because I am welcoming a new friend of mine, Brian Minnick, to the podcast. Brian has authored a book, and this book is awesome. It's called Montauk is Strange, The Archives, 36 Years Exploring Camp Hero, Long Island, and the Legend of the Montauk Project. Now, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar out there with the Montauk Project, so Brian will fill us in on that, but I came across it years ago listening to old Art Bell episodes where he had Al Bielek on and Preston Nichols, and they just dived into the Philadelphia experiment and the Montauk Project, and I went and bought one of the books, the original Montauk Project book that came out. There was a whole series of them. But I bought that book originally, and it was a very short book, and it just left me wanting so much more because it was just such a small part of the story. So we're going to welcome Brian here today to kind of fill us in on his experiences out there. And you live in Long Island, Brian. How far are you away from Camp Hero?
Well, thanks for having me, definitely, and for the intro there. And I'm about 40 miles from Camp Hero, so it's but out here, it's technically, Montauk is past the Hamptons, and I live just outside the Hamptons, which is in the summer one of the busiest places. Like, everybody from New York City comes out here and all over, and it gets so congested. So 40 miles can turn into an hour, an hour and a half there. Sometimes on the way home, it could be 3.5 hours if you leave at the wrong time. So on Long Island out east here, because there's two peninsulas, you can't just drive north and south. You have to go all the way back around to go out. We call them forks, the North and South Fork, but there's like no bridge between them. So basically you got to go around, and we base everything by time out here instead of miles. We're like, how long, how far are you away? We're like 30 minutes, but in a few days that could be like, 3 hours. So, but Montauk's, it's close, but it's far, basically.
Okay. Yeah. Cause you kind of, it's close as the crow flies, but you kind of have to go around and work your way to it.
Yeah, and a lot of 5 mile per hour driving on the way out there, just lines and just mobs of people. It's like a parking lot, we call it, slowly moving parking lot.
Yeah, when I was younger, about 20 some years ago, I was actually on tour, and I was in a band called Earshot, and I was actually on tour, and we toured all through the East Coast and the Midwest and everything, had a record out, and we were parked in, I think we were in Jersey. So we were just across the tunnel in Jersey. We were parked there for a week, just taking a break and everything. And my drum tech was actually going out to Long Island, and I wanted to tag along with them so bad just to go, but I just didn't get the opportunity to go because I told him I wanted to go there and he was going to take me. We didn't get the opportunity to go. And now that because I live on the west end of the country, I have no idea when I'm ever going to make it out there. So I have to live vicariously through you guys.
Thanks. That's why I do it too, to share. Like, there's a lot of people who really can't even like walk at all and stuff. We have a lot of, and it's nice to be able to share. Like, a lot of times we'll do, trails, walking the whole property of Camp Hero. Now that I've spent years and years going into the radar and climbing the radar and going through the tunnels and everything. And now we're exploring a lot of the parts of the base that we kind of overlooked when we were younger. I have been going there my whole life. But, I was also in a band in those same years, not a touring like that, but we played local Long Island, New York City kind of venues, and back then we used Montauk, the base, as our like muse for our band. We kind of took our demo pictures on the roof of the building there with the radar in the back.
Oh, wow.
This was in like 94. So we were like, that was like our home base kind of as our band too.
Right. What kind of music was it?
It was like a Long Island hardcore, punk, metal kind of mixed. Back then, I guess all the Stray musicians kind of gathered together and we're so strict with the types. You know, we kind of combined types and had our little scenes, and then we started playing some of the bigger venues on Long Island and in that scene. But I played drums as well, like you, so that's fun. Yeah, I can
That's
relate.
me. That's me. Yeah, that could be a whole other show.
Yeah, truly. And
So
to this, yeah.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to also say, yeah, I met, you know, I used to love, of course, Coast to Coast, and those are some of the most classic shows with Preston and Al, and you know, and Art, of course, and also I met Duncan, Al, Preston, and Peter Moon with my friends back in '94 and '95. They had meetings in the basement of a bookstore on Long Island, up further up west, and we would go there. It was like after the book was published, so it was called Montauk Night. And you paid $5 and you sit in this lecture. So we came late on the first one, and then we went to 2 full ones that we sat in on. And the second time we brought a bunch of photos and stuff after reading the book about certain things. And I got to walk up to the table and show them to Preston, and everybody was there. It was good, you know, at that age to have those, meet some of the original whistleblowers. Kind of.
Yeah, that's wild. And because again, I'm going to live vicariously through you. I would have loved to have taken part in going to see some of those. But again, that was such an East Coast thing. It was such a local thing for you.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up in Vegas, so
Wow.
Art Bell was just over the hill from me.
Oh, wow.
So I used to listen to Art Bell every night. And then when I couldn't, I would stick the VHS tape in the VHS player, plug my stereo into the back and record it and listen to it the next day.
Awesome.
And I have probably over 1,000 of those shows on a hard drive somewhere. But I mean, going back to 1992 before Coast to Coast AM. But I wish I had all the other ones that I recorded, because I listened to them religiously. And that was like, you had, you know, the Montauk guys there. I had Art Bell just over the hill for me.
That's,
you know, and I had George Knapp with and Bob Lazar, and
nice. Yeah.
you know, so that
I was recording all that stuff too back you know, I was obsessed with that stuff when I was younger. I would go to the local video store that had like the underground videos, and I got the original Bob Lazar, you know, Area 51 video, and I dubbed that right away, you know, and I had my whole collection of stuff I would see, like a big event on the news, like say the Phoenix Lights. I was recording all the live broadcasts, you know, and I have these tapes still somewhere. And but I will live vicariously through you to want to hear Coast to Coast in the desert, like at night, you know, driving or something. I would just, because that's what you picture when you hear the opening song. So.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And I used to travel back and forth from Vegas to LA a lot for gigs, and I preferred to drive in the middle of the night.
Sure.
You know, because it just seemed way more peaceful.
Yeah.
And I was driving, you know, that 250 miles, always just kind of looking up in the sky to see if I might see anything, and never did. And I never made it to the gate of Area 51. I made it to the mailbox there on the 375 that you're supposed to turn, and then it's, you know, miles and miles and miles down this road. I made it about a mile down the road. We didn't go too far, but I did Rachel, Nevada, and spent the night out there and everything. So that was you know, that was my experiences.
That's
there.
Cool.
So with the Montauk project, I mean, you grew up. When did you learn about the Montauk project? I mean, obviously you knew that Camp Hero was there and it was just kind of a cool place, but how did you learn about the Montauk project itself?
That's great. I mean, I didn't even really know Camp Hero was there. I knew the lighthouse, you know, the lighthouse is a place like they would take us on school trips and stuff. So I had been there with, like, you know, school trips. They take you all the way out there. I've been to Montauk a bunch of times with, like, my grandma. She used to take me to, like, they had shark fishing, and like there was this place you could buy like dried fish, you know, like shark teeth, and I would buy like dried seed horses and stuff. I don't know. And then I was out there a bunch, but I didn't start counting any of that. Like I started counting, exploring. Our parents used to go to the parade out there. There was like a St. Patrick's Day parade that everybody would go. And then we would go like tailgate at the lighthouse parking lot, which is right next to, I mean, part of Camp Hero is right next to the lighthouse. The big white tower is actually a bunker for Camp Hero. So I didn't really know that Camp Hero existed. And it wasn't really called Camp Hero like in public knowledge until it became Camp Hero State Park. But Camp Hero was the Army side of this property. And later they had the Montauk Air Force Station bought half the property and moved in. So it was both Army and Air Force. And at one point, both of them were there at the same time, half and half. Plus the Navy's in town, and they have property right there at Camp Hero, as well as the Coast Guard. So you have all of these different agencies with borders right next to each other. So when I first went out there, we were at the parking lot, our families were hanging out, and we got on BMX bikes. This was in the 80s, 1987. We were like 11, about 11-year-old. There was 4 of us, and we got on the bikes and rode just randomly, and we found a bunker that was open, an old World War II bunker. And it was a hole in the wall, like big enough to squeeze through, like a body size hole. And we climbed through. We didn't have flashlights or nothing. And by the time we kind of turned the first corner, the light was fading away. And in that tunnel, there was like this one point where there was a huge hole in the floor, and we had to cross over that to get to keep going. And we didn't realize how deep it was. So we were stepping on a little bit of rebar against the wall and climbing over this hole. And then we dropped a piece of concrete in on the other side, and it went down for like 3 or 4 seconds before it hit water. So we were like, oh my God, we cannot go back over this again. We're lucky. And the wind was blowing up out of it. So we kept going, and we went down another level, and then eventually saw light, and we came out through, like climbed up sand and came out through a hole right out of the ground on the bluffs. And I realized later, now that I have all these blueprints, they're formerly secret, but they're old World War II blueprints of the bunkers. We went into a signal corps cabling tunnel, and then we came out through a hatch, which is like a trapdoor, cement rung ladder, but all the sand had caved in. So we thought we were like climbing up out of a cave, so that was like our Goonies adventure back then. And that hooked us. So years later, that was in 87. And then like 4 years later, this book comes out, and then like we caught on to it in our senior year. We were passing it around between friends. In fact, I still have the copy my friend lent me, and his grandfather was the judge in East Hampton, the same judge that Preston and Peter Moon wrote about in their book about getting ticketed on the base and going to the trial to fight it. They signed the book for the judge, Preston Nichols, Peter Moon, best wishes to the judge. And that's the book I still have to this day. It's pretty funny because they wrote about it. Anyway, it was just like one of those little synchronicities. But so that's when I heard about the Montauk project, and there was this radar. Everybody's focusing on the radar. And I said, I've been there. I went in tunnels in a bunker. I don't see a radar. And I've been out there a million times. It's so well hidden when you drive out between hills and trees and foliage. So then you start noticing it. Once you see it once, you know where to look. But as you turn, you might see it on the horizon for a minute, but it's very hard to see even driving out there. Besides,
right.
It's up there. It's high.
Right. And that's what people, and I'll speak for myself, that's what I don't envision. When I see videos, it looks kind of flat to me out there, but they're like you just mentioned, hills and stuff. So it is kind of hidden in there, and you don't see it that well. And that's pretty wild because, like I said, I envision it when I see videos or when I picture it in my head. I kind of picture this park, this state park with this bluff where you've got the lighthouse, and then it's just kind of flat, and you can see the radar tower, and you can see some of the bunkers. I don't have no idea how big the area is or how spread out everything is.
Oh yeah, okay. That's really smart what you're saying too, because that is the perception, and it's always hidden in plain sight. But they built it in this area because it's on the glacial moraines. They call them there, where the glacier retreated and then went back. It left a whole bunch of sediment, so it made these like spines of like the 2 backbones of Long Island are these really high hilly areas, and they're filled with these giant rocks, that were on top of the ice. And so that's where Montauk is. Basically, there's this giant raised up area. Then they built artificial hills on top of it, because I have the old topographical maps, and you can see that they man-made hills where some of the bunkers are. Not to mention that the radars are over the horizon radars, so they the range depends on how high up they are. So they picked all the highest hills to put radar towers on. There were several radars there, at least 10, if not more, over time. Yeah.
See, I had no idea of that, because I think that there's just that one the Sage radar tower.
Yeah. A lot of people
do. Idea there was more.
And a lot of people don't really know that's a radar. Some people think it's a satellite dish. I've heard it called a communications tower. And I don't know if everybody realized that it rotated in a circle, like once every 12 seconds. And it's a microwave radar. So it would send out, it's kind of like sonar, like it returns, and it would go in a circle looking for incoming Soviet bombers. It went 300 miles out, the big radar. But the smaller ones, they're like these cylindrical metal buildings, and they have like a rubber white bubble on top, and inside that white bubble is a radar. It kind of looks like a golf ball. That's what I call them. But inside there's either a radar that rotates, or there's ones that go like this, rock up and down. Those are called height finders, and they work with the other ones that go in a circle. Those are long range radars. And so Montauk had a whole series of these around the big tower, which was so cool. When we went there, we didn't see the white bubbles anymore. Some were like popped in the grass there, and all the radars were taken off. But these big buildings were great. They were steel towers, and you could climb them, and they were pretty tall as well. And there's a giant computer building there that MIT was a part of it once, and they actually developed some of the very beginnings of the internet there. Wide area networks, light pens, keyboards, cathode ray tubes. A lot of this stuff was developed for this early experiment called the Cape Cod system, where they were linking up all these radars, and they needed like live information. That's kind of like how the internet was developed for SAGE. And that's what that big toll radar, the big one that's there to this day. There was only 10 of those built, and that's the last one really remaining. And it was the first one out in the field as well. So they did a lot of testing there when it was rolled out. They had turned it off a bunch to calibrate it. But actually, it goes a lot into a lot of the experiments at the time, and papers in colleges and universities were about microwave auditory effect. The Frey effect is Alan Frey wrote a paper in '61 on this. And basically, you can hear microwave in your head when it passes the beam, uses your skull as a sonic medium, like a drum. When you speak next to a drum, the snare can, right. So it's the same thing. And you'll hear either a click, a hissing, a pop, or I forgot the fourth one, but there's 4 sounds you would hear when it passes by. And so they capitalized on this over the years and used it for a variety of things. And just recently, I got some more documents right off from the .gov websites that pretty much spell it out, that this is exactly what this does. We're going to do this and this and this. They lay out all their experiments, and then they say at the end of it, now we're looking for a land-based radar site. I'm like, oh my God, that's just like, but it's so hard to assemble all of these little pieces. And the best way, I think, is like combining history with the legends. And when you find stuff that, from both sides, the logic and the imaginative, and when you find them, they're linking up and matching in dates, that's when you find some really cool stuff to support some of these things. So,
okay.
Makes me wonder.
I mean, well, it sounds like there was a hell of a lot going on out there.
Yeah.
So I know that some of the people that will listen to this later or watch this later, some of the people that are watching it now aren't familiar with the Montauk project and what it was all about. So I know you've been asked a million times when you do these podcasts, give me like a 5-10 minute overview of kind of what it was all about, so people kind of have an idea. So once we move into some of the other stuff that we're going to talk about, they have a base of reference.
Yeah, sure. So this place there's like 2 sides, like I said, in the way I look at it, but there's the local history of Montauk is like this place where all these important things have happened in history and with technology over the years. Presidents, major decisions in the US kind of have always been tied to this place. Then the other side is the whole legend and conspiracy side of things, that, there was already some secret stuff being done here that was kind of suspected. But once the book came out, you had mind control, time travel, pulling people off the streets to become, super soldiers, psychic spies, agents, this rabbit hole goes very, very deep and connects to so many things. But you do have a real history with so many impacts and so many weird coincidences and synchronicities. So altogether, Montauk is called The End. It's a strange place, and mainly the show Stranger Things is based off of Montauk. It was named Montauk, and it took place at Camp Hero, because I have the original script somewhere down here, and it's they just kind of copied and pasted Camp Hero over with Hawkins Lab, and Camp Hero Montauk into Hawkins, Indiana, and everything else is the same. They just kind of changed the location. So, you have this show that's kind of loosely based off of a lot of the, not only legends, from what I'm saying, legends is the unproven lore from the books, but also they have a lot of 80s references and stuff that from that time, that fit. But I think there's a lot of also basically reports that people have made over the years, or some of the personal accounts that have been on the internet after the book series and some of the blogs. A lot of that stuff has also been incorporated into this whole, now I don't think people really source like where things have come from anymore. like whether it came from Preston or Peter Moon's books, or it came from another author, early author on the internet, some of these blogs, or people's podcasts and their own testimony, it kind of gets blurred together. And I wanted to reestablish not only, what I saw out there, what I found in research, but also I wanted to go through chronologically and spell out how this all came to be, how this story grew with the books. I have all the early internet stuff I've been digging up, and to really show and what the people are saying now. To this day, people are contacting me and giving me all kinds of amazing stories, pictures from live on the scene, documents, everything. So I have a lot to share from others as well. And altogether, it's just a ton of information. And this place has been so fascinating to me over the years. You have paranormal aspects. You have a lot of UFO tie-ins. And I have actual documents that went right to the White House. They're on government sites that they recorded UFOs with the radar passing over the U.S. and they would pass it off to the next radar station. And these things would cross the U.S. in a matter of like minutes. They were going thousands of miles an hour. And basically there's so much, like there's every department, you have cryptids. There's people talking about ancient structures at Montauk, ancient cities underwater. And there's a lot of government ties. Like did you know the Montauk Lighthouse was the very first thing the United States built as a country? It's the first public works project, and it was the first guiding light to the New World before the Statue of Liberty into New York Harbor. So it was commissioned by George Washington. So it was a very it was a Masonic structure. It's a place of importance, Montauk, and there's a lot more to it. Then there was rumors of pyramids there. You have time travel. Like I said, this just goes so deep; it connects into everything. And so in the book series, part of this is time travel, which is a very exciting aspect of it. And you have psychic powers as well. So people that were, doing remote viewing, and the show involves telekinesis or moving things with your mind. So all of that together, a place where they did a lot of these experiments, some world-changing ones. And from there, you can go any which way. And there's a lot out there on it,
Right. And I mean, if you didn't know about the Montauk Project and you watched Stranger Things, a lot of people wouldn't even realize that there was actually programs like that going on, and are probably still going on to this day.
Yep. And
I had always heard that as in the case of the Montauk Project, they were using that radar tower and you would know obviously better than I would, obviously, but they were using that radar tower to beam frequencies across the area to affect the general population's state of mind.
Exactly. It's a mood control, and it's 100% scientifically easy. Like these are microwaves, they're beaming upon you. And when they, at different frequencies create different moods and different effects. So it was like, at first they learned this and cataloged it at Montauk. It took years. They would have R&R where people would come for rest and relaxation, and they would just broadcast different frequencies and see how this one makes people agitated. They would empirically get this data and catalog it. This one makes people lazy. This one makes people happy for no reason. So now, what this is. So eventually they didn't need the sweeping dish. If you look on top of the Montauk radar, there's a pole on the very top of the dish. That's an omnidirectional radar. So it goes out in every direction. Right. And that is a dipole. And that's what they ended up finding out. That's all they needed for this. Instead of the sweeping beam, it was too high power. This would just go out. And you know what that became? That's in every neighborhood around the world right now, is the cell phone towers, 5G towers. Yeah, yep. It's a microwave dipole antenna. It's the same thing as what's on top of. So if you look at Montauk, there's things going on, and there's so many projects now and so many people involved, and it's changed the world, like I said. But if you trace everything back to where it came from, Montauk was the first of a lot of these techniques and these things. So it's kind of like the origin point. And I don't know if they're doing anything much there anymore, unless there was some kind of deep underground military base, which can't be absolutely sure. There's only speculation. I've done my best to find every kind of mention of underground structure and map them, which is something I'm working on. But yeah, I mean, I just look at it as the origin point for a lot of what we see now in this world.
Well, what blows my mind is back in the 80s when this stuff was going on there with the mind control and the Montauk boys and we'll get into that in a second. But what blows my mind is there was stuff going on during that time, and there were still people coming out to see the lighthouse and people coming out to see all these things. And no one even did anyone suspect that anything crazy was going on there, or they were just like, oh, it's just a military base.
That's a great question, and I think you still see that to this day in a way. Think Stranger Things is such a popular show, but if you go to Montauk Village, there's, I went there looking for stickers for people and stuff, and there's nothing there, anything to do with the radar anywhere. Not a single gift shop. You do not see anything about Stranger Things. It's like it's just completely ignored. There's this kind of, people don't want to talk about it out there, is what I gather. I mean, there's a lot of locals who are really into it, and I've made friends with, certain people along the way that are out there. It's just something they don't, I think tourism has a lot to do with,
Right.
why they're the way they are. But yeah, they don't seem to want to talk about it much out there.
Right. Yeah. I didn't think that you would walk into a gift shop and find a radar tower snow globe.
I would buy one right away, man.
Well, of course, both of us would buy one. I would send you money and have you send one to me.
Sure. Yeah.
But, there's no refrigerator magnets or anything like that.
No.
But when I see pictures of the base, immediately, the first picture you always see is that radar tower.
Yeah.
That is like become the symbol, the icon of that base. And listening to the old stories that they were, Preston Nichols was talking about, and Duncan, and Al Bielek was more Philadelphia experiment, and they all tied them all in together, and it was such a phenomenal, crazy, fantastic story. Like, you really had to be like us and really be into that type of thing to believe it to begin with, because it was just so far out there.
Yeah.
And I mean, that stuff happened. Some of it happened. I mean, there was a Montauk chair and stuff like that, the mind control. And so it's just pretty wild that stuff was going on out there and nobody was even aware of it. And it was essentially right in their backyard.
Yeah, it really is. And they also supposedly started using people as they were testing the limits, the mileage, the distance, the range. They would sweep right over where I grew up and even hit parts of Connecticut, because if you do like anywhere out east here on Long Island, if you do like a local business search on Google, it gives you the radius. We're picking up Connecticut all the time because it's across the Sound, the Long Island Sound, but it's not very far really. So yeah, eventually they started reaching the furthermost range of this just to test it. That was part of the original story, and it is wild. It goes, I forgot, the Philadelphia experiments tied in, of course, and that was Al's, UFOs and Philadelphia. And when they joined forces to make this book with Peter Moon, and he used to work with L. Ron Hubbard. And so you have this like force of people in this incredible story that, like you said, it pulls you in. You have to be like, at times you ask yourself, I wrote that in my book too. I went through so many cycles of belief and disbelief through the years of this, at times I'm like, come on, this is crazy. But then I've questioned, are they like making a little extra just to try to throw off like some of the actual real stuff? I always questioned everything. And I kind of go in a circle sometimes. I end up back where I start. And then I'll find things that prove, like, for example, somebody just sent me a document. It's like 450 pages, but on one of them, it's about using microwave radar to control people's moods. And it's actually called Pandora. And basically, they sent a training packet to set up these laboratories to begin these studies to all these sites. And one of them on there is AIL, Long Island Central Islip. If you remember the books, that's where Preston said he worked.
Right.
So I'm like, look at this, here we are again, when I question something and then I find something that backs it up, and it kind of sends me, spinning sometimes and trying to, so I've done a lot of chronological timeline to try to figure and sort some of this stuff out. Like I lay on the stuff from the legends right on the same timeline with the facts from the military history and, stuff like that, and see what we get after when it's all together.
Right. And you know what they always say? It's like, if you want to hide something, hide it in plain sight.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sprinkle a little, there's a little truth in everything.
That's right. And that's what Camp Hero is all about, hiding in plain sight, because they actually on the base, they had a World War II gymnasium. It looks like a church. There's a steeple, and it's actually a gym. Then they have 17 bunkers there, but about 11 of them are what they call fire control stations. They're like little towers, cement towers, but there's a house built around them, like a wooden house. So they look like a cottage, but it's actually this bunker, you know, and I have all the blueprints for those, but it was all about deception and hiding in plain sight. They would actually paint like windows on some of the cement bunkers, and you know, so that's one of the reasons that they had tunnels to go between. Everything relied on phone wires, and as you see, when people hit targets, they want to take out the way that they communicate. Back then, these cables had to be underground. Then they had to have access to them in case one broke along the way. I had to be able to repair them. Also, I said, yeah, and you don't want people running, you know, here's all this hidden stuff, and then you see these army guys running from one building to another all day. You know, so they had these tunnels to move back and forth, in time of war at least. And so they've always been denied there. The people that worked at the parks and everybody said there's nothing underground, but you know, we've been underground in some World War II. There were some deeper parts they didn't show on the blueprints. And then the Air Force built their own underground structures just for utilities, but then they also had fallout shelters. I found all the records for those in some of the Freedom of Information Act files that I got from the veterans that worked on the base, the 773rd Radar Squadron Air Force guys. They have their own Facebook vets page, and they shared a bunch of documents from the base. And so I was able to use these to show that there are fallout shelters in at least 6 locations. So that, you know, that shows that there's additions below some of the other converted buildings. That's why I would think that that would be a staging point to go any deeper or expand, would have to be out of those where they were left alone. And I was trying to think, how would you actually build this too, and what makes sense?
Right. So, how did you, I mean, you were talking about going out to the lighthouse and riding your bikes around and seeing everything. What possessed you to start? I mean, obviously everybody's got the curiosity bug and they're like, oh man, look at these old cool structures. Let's go check these out. What really got you? How did the story come to light for you? Like, what got you going, man, there's something else to this place. I'm hearing all these stories. I've got to dive into this. What was that switch that flipped? What flipped that switch for you?
That's a really good question. You know, I don't know. Something about it just started, you know, it started dreaming about it a lot all the time, and just I started thinking about it and the base and the layout, and you know, I'd start dreaming of these radar places like all around the world. You know, like a lot of those golf ball radars I told you about, radomes they're called. But I started just dreaming about like going visiting different. You know, one was in like a cornfield, one was like on the water on middle docks, which I saw on TV years later on Dolphin Island, Louisiana. Because I said to myself, there's no way they put a radar like right on the water. But turns out this was like exactly like I thought of it, which was kind of weird. So I wrote about that instance, and it's kind of like an effect that a lot of people have when they first start reading this story. They kind of feel familiar, involved, the deja vu, or they might dream about it. Some people jump right into that you were there. And you know, I'm not sure exactly what it means. You know, now you can open up the whole Pandora's box of like, or like just the whole the rabbit hole of like, you know, was I there in another timeline or another life, or is it 20 and back? And, you know, people have all these theories, but I just kind of leave it as, you know, I don't know, because it could be Akashic record reading. It could be pretty much anything. When it comes to dreams, you're kind of diving into like extra dimensional territory there. So whatever it was, something kind of pulled me into it. I wanted to go out there and explore. And some of my other friends too, we had like a core group that was really into it. And I think they also said they felt pretty involved and were dreaming about it. But others were just wanted to see it for the first time. So we ended up amassing these rotating groups of people that would go out there routinely. Like if we could go, we went twice in a day before. We went to Manhattan and then to Montauk in one day before, like on the train, and you know, see a show, and then went the next morning. We stayed on the roof of the radar once at night for like 5 hours and just looked at the stars. So we were going there all the time for 2 years in the 90s, 94 and 95. And something was just driving us out there. We were so into it. And it was like, it was this awesome mystery. There was like a ghost town, you know, besides all these regular things that would appeal to some other people as well. It's like, there's this abandoned place. It's still kind of manicured. It's not totally destroyed yet. And it's kind of haunting and empty, and nobody's here. Yes, a lot of people seem to know about it because there's a book about it, but yet nobody's actually here with us in this giant property. And the property is 468 acres. The inner Air Force side, where it's really developed for the radar site, was like about 278 acres or something like that. and the rest was like spread out bunkers and army structures everywhere. They used to have searchlights there. They used to have, so this combination of all these different branches and different kinds of structures and buildings, it was this huge mystery. And you have this whole, something about it felt amazing there too. Like when you go back then, there was this weird feeling on the base, you know, that some people described it as like an empty or a void kind of feeling. Like others described it as like a depressive feeling. Some described it as like a high energy. So you had all these different feelings around the base. It felt very strange to be there. It's still kind of there at times now, but it's been changed so much. And a lot of those buildings have been taken down. There used to be like 100 or more buildings to explore. Now there's only like a dozen left. Yeah, and a lot of them are fenced off and really in bad condition these days. But I have a lot of the old stuff on video. I was one of the few people to like actually keep the videos. I don't know if other people filmed back then. It doesn't seem like many people did. It was pretty hard to get a video camera at that age and in those years. Like only certain families had a camcorder. You know, they're like this big tissue box. And so we had always borrowed them from like a friend's father, you know, and sometimes I don't even know if they knew. We were like, we got to get back. And like, so I'd have to go home, hook up the VCR, copy the tape, and then like erase his original video and put that back, you know. So we were like careful with this thing all day. But so we have 2 whole days, whole trips there on video. They're about a half hour each because we probably hit the pause button. But they're 94 and 95. Some of the only footage. The only footage is Preston and Peter Moon's Montauk tour video. And we have a lot of that same stuff. We have the LSD rooms recorded inside the tunnels.
The wallpaper.
Yep, on the roof of the radar. I have the wallpaper. Yeah, I have a sample of one of the rooms. I wanted to show you. I'll have to get it out. I'll send you a picture of it. But yeah, but basically, there's that footage we have is now looking back. I wish we could. That's probably the last time I was in the tunnels again in '99. But they've been sealed since it's been a park. As you know, the LSD house is gone. You know, all of those radar towers that used to be there are all gone. So I'm glad we got some of the footage because there used to be basements in those. And the computer building has 4 stories below it. So there's all these cool buildings that I'm trying to document now and get mapped out.
So is the big radar tower still there or is it gone?
Yes. Yeah, that's still there. The dish on top is falling to pieces. It's losing a lot of panels, like big squares. And now it's lost over 50%. So it's, yeah. It's heading, each time I go, I try to check to make sure it's still there, you know. I know one day it's going to fall, you know, I'll be sad, but it's hanging in there though. And the wind out there is crazy. So, but it's really dangerous to walk under that. So I don't advise people really hang out too long under that dish if they go in there. Because when those things fall, it's loud. We've actually heard them, you know, pieces falling, and maybe amplified, but it sounds very loud when you're in there. And those pieces they're large. They're about, I don't know, the squares are probably like 6-foot squares of radar, and they have little holes in them. That's the same little holes you see on your microwave oven in your house, the black sticker. You see all the little dots. That's what's on the radar panel. There's holes about 4 inches. And that's to stop the big microwaves that would bounce off the back. They can't go through that shaped hole.
Right.
Pretty crazy.
I should have really made it a point to go out there when I was close. I really disappointed in myself.
Oh no,
because I had such a fascination with it and reading the book and such a fascination with that place. And I should have gone out there, man. And so when you're walking around out there back then, was there active security?
Yes.
Were you dodging security when you were walking around?
Yeah, all the time. Not only were we dodging them, but it's a part of our whole, like, I did these, part of the book is, my book's in sections kind of. So it's like different kind of reads. And there's one that's field reports that are all the field reports of us going out there starting in 1988 when we were as kids, going through all these years when we were going there in like the 90s. And then I stopped when it became a park, but I have 45 more all through like some of the TV shows and YouTube up to now. And that's it. That's number 75. I stopped. So that's my 75th one. But those old ones, at least a dozen of them, they were chasing us around. There was helicopters started appearing. And one time a helicopter even flew down the road after us. And we don't know if they were just messing with us or chasing us. But there used to be security there, and a lot of like strange utility workers that kind of seemed like spies. People would always write about the fishermen or the joggers or the General Electric guy that just comes walking out of the woods with his clipboard, but the security force was a combination of state park policemen and a civilian that would seem to be in charge of the police, and then all of these parks workers. And they had these blazers, like black hunter green or white blazers with really long antennas, tinted windows, and they would just come flying out of nowhere. You'd hear the tires, so we'd all scatter. Now they'd chase us like 5 or 6 times, and we always got away. But one time, we were, and this is the one we have on video. We were going into the LSD house, and they saw us. So we were hiding in back, and they were out front. We went in there, and they drove off. So that we ran to the radar, climbed all the way up, and then we saw them come back with backup, and we record them go into the building we were just in. They're looking for us, but we're already like so far away up in the sky, across the base. We're filming them like they're like this big in our camera. And then we decided, for some reason, we kind of forgot they were chasing us. We went to the tunnels, and we're in there, and everything echoes out through this little hole, and we're in there like making a ruckus. And then when we came out, they were there waiting for us. So we have all this recorded. The guy even calls it on the radio. He calls it the access bunker. We're like, access bunker? What is it access to, But this is one of the bunkers they turned into a fallout shelter, I found on records. And we even took a picture in there a couple of years later, went back in the tunnels, and we got a picture that says nuclear casualty buddy system. And it's this really huge aluminum sign for like, nuclear casualty. But that was just more proof it was turned into a fallout shelter at some point. Not only that, but so they did have security, and until it became a park, it was pretty sketchy the way they would chase you around, because as a state park, 85% of it is supposed to be accessible to the public, and there was never any signage posted. They left up the old signs they had when they closed in 1981, 83 is disputed. But anyway, the Air Force signs are still on there. So all these years, they were supposed to post signage that you weren't in. I have the deed from the county. I got the real estate deed where they transferred the property to eventually become a state park away from the military. And in there, they have some stipulations that, they could take it back at any time if they wanted to, this whole property. Also, you cannot dig. There's no mining rights, so you can't go underground there. There's a couple little interesting parts in there. And one of them was, how many branches still have property here. And there's still like some active spot of it. Basically, there's one little portion that's still active through Coast Guard and Navy. So it was just all this stuff together is amazing and fascinating. But security there has always been a thing, and they definitely have chased us around, and other people have been caught. In fact, the same 2 guys that were well known as the civilian cop pair, the cop lived on base in the AT&T Long Lines building with his German Shepherd. He lived there for years, and the other guy, I'm not sure where he came from, but a lot of them worked out of the maintenance garage. So they had those 2 buildings active for the parks people. But they also, the same guys ticketed and arrested Preston Nichols and Peter Moon. That's how I got that original book that's signed by them. And then they also caught K.B. Wells, another author who wrote a book called The Montauk Files, pretty back, I think, in the late 90s, he wrote the book. And then some of the internet authors like Valentine Designs or Stealth Skater, John Quinn Newshawk, even a friend of mine that's a summer resident there was chased. So there was many people who had the same account, the same story almost, written and by different people, but it was the same encounter almost. Like it was like by the book, it was very strange. And there was also these food records that I found back then. And I was on this show on a History Channel called The Dark Files. That's what I left Montauk for a while, kind of was doing different jobs and just forgot about it. And then the History Channel found me somehow because one of my old videos, guy at a newspaper out here, told them, you have to talk to this guy, told him about the video. And I ended up going on this show. And in there, I actually met the state trooper who ticketed us back then. And we were just like talking, like, he's like, I was just doing my job. I'm like, yeah, we were just exploring. So he was cool. Right. And even the friend of mine that I met on those shows, he was involved in this. He said he was one of those kids. He lived in Montauk and used to go through there on his bikes. Another kid would take him through. He was like one of those kids in Stranger Things. And he worked there for many years, for like a couple decades. And right before he retired, he let me into the AT&T Long Lines building. This is one of my videos that has like some of the most views, actually. For some reason, they caught on. I don't know why AT&T Long Lines, but there's supposed to be this big bunker under there. And I was kind of focusing on the technical part of it. But he let me in that building. And in the back, there's this computer room that's just immaculate, like all this old equipment that's never been seen before. Nobody really goes in there. And I did find a spot where I'm looking. He let me crawl down in the crawl space, like a hatch in the floor, trapdoor, and into the basement. And what I did find is that there's this wall, there's this whole foundation. It's all crawl space, but then next there's a part of the basement that goes deep, you can tell. And there's a window against the wall. And then when I went to the other back room on the other side, there's another window against the wall, but there's this space between those two windows that you cannot access. And that's where you see the foundation in the basement too. So I'm getting closer to figuring out, the details on some of these spots. Thankfully, people have let me in. And I got to talk to the park superintendent that day for an hour. And he told me, don't talk to him about anything paranormal, stranger things. I was like, I'll stick to pure military history with him. And he's like showing me cannonballs in his office. And
Oh, wow.
I'm just kind of getting everybody's story and info because it helps me try to I just want to know myself, really, honestly.
Right. And it probably makes it harder for you to get information because now that people have discovered the Montauk Project and Stranger Things has kind of brought light to it in a roundabout way. Now these people, they're getting more of the touristy, just the looky-loos, instead of the people such as yourself that are diving into the history of it and really want to know what's going on. So he probably gets asked all the time, hey man, what's going on out here? You see any ghosts out here? What's going on? Do people mind and messing with people's minds? What's going on around here?
Yeah,
where's the tunnels and everything? And he's probably just like, oh, come on, man. I spend all day chasing out people that are just here as looky-loos, just here to look.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure they get tired of it. And I mean, that story that I've heard, also when people, but I mean, they have that joy when they first see it. That's really cool to see, like I've given a few tours to people who came from far away, and when they first see it for the first time, they get really excited, and it's worth going back to those same old spots with them, so it's almost like living vicariously through them for the moment, seeing it for the first time. But it's one of those places people kind of make it a pilgrimage sometimes. And yeah, you do have the cover, the Cliff Notes version of this, which is kind of like what people might ask about or the basics. But you also have people who, there's a lot of stories from personal people out there right now that have this deep tale, each one of them their own personal experience about being involved in this. So I think I'm kind of on my own in this whole field of somewhere in the middle, and just because I could not possibly share all those stories that the people that I've met that say they're involved. They're like a whole book on their own, and I didn't want to do any injustices because I'm kind of sweeping through the broad, and going down every little side branch. So, and in that sense, I just want this stuff here so people can access it later. So I had all these stuff building up for years, and like, what am I going to do with this stuff? People kept saying, you got to share this or something. So that's why I called it the archives. I'm literally condensing all the stuff I've saved for the years and found, and I'm trying to put it out in 2 volumes, actually, was always the plan. That's why I kind of stopped with the field reports when it became a park in 2002. I have more stories from people and info. That was a whole section in the first one. And then more chapters, more documents, more maps, blueprints, pictures, everything. And then that's it. I'm not going to keep doing this archives. I'm just going to make that too definitive. This will be concluding that part of it. I'm going to do other stuff. But this is, I like to put all this stuff in between the chapters and everything. So it's broken up, and it's kind of like a reference is what I'm getting at. You can read it straight through. You could read it chapter by chapter or piece by piece section, but you could also just pull it out and look for like a map or a date and then put it back on the shelf. So I want it to be like the ground for people that are looking into all these different avenues. I want it to be like something like they could root into, as a basis, or maybe even just to find a year or whatever it might be, little backing.
So is there still active security there chasing people off?
Not really, but if you go inside of the fence, which is the old radar hill, they called it, part of the Air Force where all the radars were, you're not supposed to be in there. But there's a seat. I had some people just report back to me that they went in there and were kicked out by the ranger. Now, when I went with a large group of people that linked up with our usual yearly group, we would go. We we had too many people to tell, but we said we wanted to tell them don't go at the end of the day around 4 or 5 o'clock, because that's when they always come do a check. And
Right.
they had gone in there, and sure enough, they went in and they all got kicked out. So yeah, they don't really chase you or anything like that anymore, because I've gone there on certain days and literally seen families, walking in and checking out, because Stranger Things is bringing out a lot of people or familiar with it, and it's just a nice place to go and check out. So it is beautiful out there, and there's a lot. Nature is kind of growing over the whole base, and vines on the radar, and the streets are cracked. So it's got this new kind of feeling there, like nature is taking back over, animals everywhere.
And that adds to the eeriness of
it. Does.
thing.
Yeah, it sure does. They replaced this electric meter on the radar over the years several times, which always had people questioning, why do you keep replacing this meter? We've tried to look into it, but so there's always been rumors you could turn the lights on in the building still, but I mean, it's so inside there is so bad you cannot walk this. There's about, I don't know, 13 flights of steps going up to the 5 floors that get you to the roof of the radar. Though that used to be able to go to the 2nd floor most recently, which is and then the flight from the 3rd store fell down. It's hanging actually off on one side, so when that drops, it's going to make it so you can't even get to the 2nd floor, because there'll be a whole pile of broken stairs on top of it. They kind of pancake down from the roof. It's a shame they left the roof hatch open over the years, and the rain has poured in and made the steps weak. And same thing in the basement. There's standing water, so it also makes the metal corrode and stuff. So it's only a matter of time. I think they're going to seal it soon. They've been sealing everything lately. Parts of the fence, other buildings, even satellite bunkers that are across town. Somebody just went to one of those. I was thinking of going there again, and they told me don't bother. It's been completely sealed up. So people are working so hard there to keep it open, though, over the years, I must say. Every time we'd go, somebody would make a new entrance or hole, and we're just thinking, how can people do this? Like, what are they here like all night, overnight, just making a ruckus, breaking these things open? So I don't know who does it, but they've been putting in the work over the years to keep things accessible.
Yeah, I've seen pictures or maybe videos where, you've got one of the bunkers and it's been sealed off with cement, and then somebody chipped a hole through it to crawl into it. And that just blows my mind that, like you just said, people sit there, like, you're not going to hear that noise all night as somebody's chipping away at that thing trying to get into it. And they probably, and you sit there and wonder, okay, they probably originally sealed it in the hopes that maybe they were just hiding something. They didn't want people exploring and going all over in these tunnels and getting lost or hurt.
Yeah.
But now, because it's been so long and everything's in such poor shape, they probably should seal it before somebody seriously gets hurt.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people have said. That I talked to some of the coastal defense study group guys who are like really big into World War II bunkers, and learning some of those historical details have helped me figure out some of the other stuff with Montauk. And in the process, I've gotten all these blueprints and cable maps and everything from them. And they told me a similar story, where there was a place somewhere in the Northeast where a kid was in one of these towers, and the stairs went down, and he actually was stuck in there for days. And after that incident, they had sealed it up for good, like really sealed it. So it's only a matter of time. And, people climb that tower quite a bit. I've seen so many videos where kids climb it, but some of the other free climbers that you see around the world on like the highest buildings, they've also climbed up. They climbed the dipole antenna on top. Actually, somebody I've talked to, that one that I was saying the 5G towers are based off, it's like a very thin pole, and he actually climbed that and stood on top of that. I was like watching it, but my stomach was dropping. I'm like, oh man. Plus the thing is so rusty and falling apart. It's eventually they're going to seal that place, and it's covered in ticks there. It's infested with Lone Star ticks, which are supposed to be from Texas. As Montauk's always been famous for ticks, but in this case, they all seem to be concentrated near the radar, and there's this really tall grass. So we would start getting what we thought were chiggers, and we're covered in hundreds of bites on each limb that are so itchy. And then we realized they're these Lone Star larvae, and you can't see them, but they leave all these welts, and they could carry this thing called alpha-gal meat allergy, where you become allergic to eating animal products. So it would be like a forced vegetarian, or you get allergic. Yeah.
I don't want any part of that. Maybe I won't go.
Yeah, so that's it between the months of July and September. So we were doing it each year to ourselves, torturing ourselves, and now we're like, all right, we've all had like enough punishment. We're just gonna wait, and it's so much nice there. If you do go in the winter, it's fine. I mean, those things are gone. The foliage is gone. You can see what's like under the ground there, and there's no traffic. That's my favorite part. So it's really beautiful there in the fall. It's like
Yeah, because a lot of people don't want to go out there because it's cold, and they don't want to go out there and hang out there and wander around because it's too cold. But that's a perfect time because you have the place all to yourself.
Yeah, and before it gets too cold in the fall, it's just right. You know, it's you're looking over the ocean. Yeah, you have the whole place to yourself. There's trails and just you could walk for like miles, and you probably only pass a person or two.
So you've written this book, and so you've become kind of the go-to guy when it comes to Montauk. And have you had? Well, I was gonna ask the question. It was a stupid question at that point, but I'm sure you've had. I'm rephrasing it. I'm sure you've had people that work there come to you, and say, "Hey, here's what was going on, but don't use my name." Da 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 da. But here's what was going on, or I saw this, or what you heard about this was true. I'm sure you've had that happen.
Yeah. Not only did I know people growing up who worked there, family friends, or in other related, like Long Island has a ton of military industrial sites, but also over the years, people that worked at the park had also kept in touch with me outside and given me hints on things. I could tell you a part of that in a second. And then just the third part of that was there are people who used to work there or something like that that also gave me stuff. So I'm going to share every piece of it everything I have, I'm going to share with everybody else. That's my main goal. The part where the parks guys told me something was interesting because I went to this satellite bunker, which is like across town in this place called Shadmore. And I went on this date, December 18th. I didn't realize it was kind of like a holiday where you might see this kind of thing called Saturnalia. I went to a bunker and I was going to climb in there, and I stick my head in and I hear all these people singing upstairs, like four people, maybe 2 guys, 2 girls. And they were singing like this crazy harmony. And I realized it was like dark, it sounded like, it's just the sound of it. I'm like, oh, maybe I'll wait a second. And they were singing something, Lo, the eye of darkness, evil. And they were singing pretty good, but it was also like, all right, maybe I'll leave them alone for now because I had yelled out to them. They didn't hear me. I'm like, that was my chance to, back out of here. So I left it. And then the guys that saw my video from the park, they told me they went the next day, and then they said they posted it on Facebook Live. So I looked on my friend's page that worked there, and sure enough, they had them climbing through the hole that I went through the day before, and the guy went upstairs, and I said, did you find anything? He said, no, it was actually really clean in there, actually like too clean. And it smelled like bleach, he said, because they went in there looking for like a sacrifice or something,
Right.
And so that was interesting. Like these guys were watching my video and like acted on it the next day. So that was a moment for me. I said, all right, well, I gotta be careful, what I post, but obviously they know I'm like obsessed with the history and trying to see these structures until they actually crumble, or figure out what I need to in them. I was still doing tests in the radar basement up until last year, trying to figure out if the legends were true that they really poured cement trucks filled beneath the radar. Because keep in mind, there's 10 of these radars and they're all built like cookie cutters. So there's this guy in Washington who took the radar off the top, used it as his own residence, filled it up with like all this yard sale stuff. He had like 100 pairs of boots, like 5 drum sets, like all these carpets. This whole place is filled, but it's like the radar tower as we know it, but perfectly clean. So then when he sells it on a real estate website, they do a walkthrough when you sell something, and they had to take pictures of every room. So they took pictures of the entire basement. So now I have the exact rooms that are under Montauk, because these are all built the same by Sperry, this company my father actually worked for. Not when they built the radar. He worked there much later, but they did like gyroscopes. And basically these rooms I found the room where the ladder goes down, because I found where you're looking up at that in these real estate photos, and beneath the radar, which is this huge like part of the Montauk thing. Everybody's always filming the elevator, not the radar. In the radar building, there's the elevator shaft, which has always been photographed. It's flooded at the bottom, but I have pictures from below the stop springs. where you would maintain this radar in this huge underfloor. So what we did when we went there was use an underwater camera and put it in in the water there over the grate. And then we also threw glow stick rocks down, and they did really stop where you would imagine they filled in with cement. So that would be so much cement, like so much square footage to fill that. I don't know how it would be possible, but it looks like they really did that. So,
well, I would imagine that you would just have to fill up the main access area.
Yeah.
So stuff beyond that main access area is probably still pristine because it's untouched.
Yeah.
But, they probably shut a door or something and then just filled that area up above it. So you don't have access to down there. And I remember hearing stories, and it was probably on our bell later on when maybe Al was on again or Preston was on again, where they were talking about how there was still big electrical cabling running into the ground and people hearing what sounded like machinery running.
Yes.
While they were out there.
Yeah. That's so strange because I've always talked about that. And also some of the people who went scuba diving in the tunnels there, some of the locals have gone in scuba gear in these sewer tunnels underwater. But they've said they heard and felt vibrations on the pipes. So there's been all these things. And now I left the trail cam out there a few times and something turned it on in the middle of the night, like an animal or a bug on the tree or whatever. And then I heard some weird sound, metal, but also there's a couple other sounds I have recorded. One of them is like this old alarm that goes off that seems to be like a ghost alarm. It seems to be coming from a building, like maybe underground. But there's these vibration things. We just went last week in the heat wave here. We were looking for this missing bunker. We couldn't find it. That was like our latest video. But in there, we both heard this really loud and felt it. It was almost like an earthquake. And yeah, I know sometimes the huge ocean waves from the Atlantic hit the piles of rocks and you could get these deep vibrations, but this was a little different. And then we went, maybe another 50 feet away. And then again, we heard something that sounded like a train track or something vibrating. So after all these years that we finally, you just said that, but it just happened to us like a week ago. So there's these sounds, like industrial sounds that seem to come out of there. And other people have even described glowing green lights that you can see from afar out at the point at night in that area. So it's very interesting. I'm not sure, but some very interesting stuff about, the ocean floor there as well that I found.
Well, I know that, years ago there was a picture taken of some sort of something that had washed up on the beach and they named it the Montauk Monster.
Yes.
And I mean, did they ever find out exactly what that was, or is this still kind of an enigma?
No, it's still an enigma. And there was another thing found a few years later that got overlooked that looked similar. Then there was supposed to be one on Plum Island. And I think some of that stuff actually overshadowed the real human body that was found on Plum Island that had really long fingers and 5 trepanation holes and very pale. It was a very strange story. And it was in all the local newspapers and they had a coroner sketch, and that I cannot find the original. I have this tiny JPEG, but I remember it was on Jesse Ventura's show. And I found a blog where like you scroll parallax and you can only get like half the picture. And I had taken those pieces and put them back together and it's like changed the tints. And I put that in the book actually, so everybody could have it. But that's a real thing that also washed up. So that was around the same time. But in the book, I also followed the path, like what happened that day when they found the Montauk Monster, the people who found it, the 3 girls, and the guy who took it and tried to make it into an art piece by rendering it down in somebody's yard. And I met a kid out on the base who said that was his dog. He had a pet chip, like info pet tracking chip, and he knew everybody was like fighting over his dog's body, and they were trying to make money off it and stuff. So he went and took it out of the yard because he saw where it was on the map, and everybody was saying they stole it from me. So then they started fighting with this other family in Montauk who they thought stole it on purpose. This guy told me that it was really his dog in the ocean. So you have all these stories. I don't know what to make of it. But the only thing I know is that in one of our old videos, we're going through the tunnels and on the floor, there's like a part of an animal and it looks just like the same thing that's on the beach there. And it was, which made me think people did that to it, which scared me even more. I'm like, what kind of sick people are in here in these tunnels with us, So it's just a wild place. And there's there's people that go there at night and stuff, so you don't know who you're running into when you
Right.
go.
Yeah, and you mentioned Plum Island, and Plum Island, there's a lot of strange stuff going on in Plum Island as well.
Yeah, yeah. There's like Long Island's loaded with these places. So you had the Tesla Free Energy Tower, Wardenclyffe Laboratory,
Right.
down nuclear power plant there. You had the Naval Weapons Factory in Grumman's where they made F-14s, and you had nuclear missiles in Army ones. Then you had the Air Force ones in the Pine Barrens. You had radar sites. You had B&L, which the big three, I think, are the three former Army forts, which are Plum Island, Brookhaven National Labs, where they have the particle accelerator that works directly with CERN.
Right.
Their project together is called Atlas. And then you have Montauk, Camp Hero, which was like an artillery site that became a radar site. But back in the Army, Camp Hero was Camp Hero. Plum Island was Fort Terry, and B&L, Brookhaven National Labs, was Camp Upton. And so the three of these went from, World War II into high science. They had a lot of paperclip scientists at all three locations. Plum Island's responsible for all these animal experiments. They were basically a chemical warfare lab for 4 years, and then became Department of Agriculture. And they were supposed to be studying bovine diseases, but a lot of people link tick-borne illnesses to Plum Island. And B&L, you have them discovering the Higgs boson particle. That's where this particle in 2012, they discovered it here, not at CERN. It's the project where they work together, but it was actually discovered on Long Island. And the particle blinks in and out of existence. It's like teleports in and out of reality. So it's here sometimes, not here. And B&L also made the first maglev trains in 1968. So they could have easily made tracks to, there's rumors that it is connected to Camp Hero underground, what I just call Montauk, the underground base. But they also made the first video game in 1968, the first nuclear reactor, and all these other things. So that you have like all this science and military here, high science, important sites. And now it's more just, people are here. There's nothing really active except for like B&L and a few sites. It's become more residential out here, basically.
Right. Well, there's rumors, because I grew up in Vegas.
Yeah.
And there's rumors that under certain casinos, there's train stations.
Wow.
And these maglev trains would pick people up and they would go to work, and they would be able to get to all these far off places rather quickly.
Yes.
Throughout the country with these underground maglev trains and go to work. Just like in Vegas, we have the Janet flights, the white plane with the red stripe that takes you to Area 51.
Yes.
These people were talking about these train stations underneath some of these casinos.
Wow.
That would take you all over the country to work, and then you just commute back the same day. So, I have no doubt that stuff exists. Whether there are train stations under casinos, I don't know.
It's a good place.
There's so much that exists that you and I just don't know about.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the stuff I used to love too. I have those old books, the underground tunnels and all of the speculation that we're talking about, always considered it. And it's possible, but we don't know, like they have the Janet flights, but here they have the Plum Island ferry, just like it's a smaller version. They have a special ferry that goes to Plum Island. It's all secure. You can't get in there. So, there's special ways to get into things. And that's one of the things that people always ask me, like, is there a way to get underground on Montauk today? And I would say no. I would say that you would get in from somewhere else. You would go into like a plain house or something, drive in elevator, and you would take a train. That's how they started doing things. Because I think after 1973, that's when Congress had the church committee, and everything got blown out in the spotlight. I think from then on out, they were like, that's where black budgets kind of started. It's like, we can no longer write this stuff because, it will come out one day. And I don't know. The rest is just a guess, right?
Right. Yeah. And speaking of black projects and black budgets, and that's a big deal right now because there's these whistleblowers that are coming out, like David Grush. I think that's how you pronounce his last name.
Wow.
He came out, Gresh, I think.
Okay.
And he came out talking about, the UFO retrievals and these UAPs and aliens and all of these things that involve black budgets, and this money's being spent on this stuff, and Congress is supposed to be notified. It's against the law and it's illegal that Congress isn't notified of these things. But his testimony, while amazing, it was all secondhand.
Okay,
I heard from this person, I heard from this person, and you're just like, well, son of a gun, man. You're telling me you've heard it from this, you've heard it from this, but when it comes to all of this stuff, I mean, even the information that you get, a lot of it's secondhand. But that, unfortunately, that's what we have to go with, because it's secondhand, because we don't have a lot of firsthand. You have some firsthand, but other stories you hear, like Preston and Al, they say they were involved with it. That's firsthand, but we can't prove that they were involved with it. I mean, unless, there's documentation floating around out there that says that Preston and Duncan and Al, these guys actually were involved. Is there any documentation that shows that any of those guys were involved with anything, like, legitimately?
No, but I have, all I've found over the years, and I haven't finished sharing it all, but I know his cousin, friend of ours. I have his mom's signature in a book over here that she gave us, Preston's mom. I talked to his neighbor across the street that grew up with him. He told me some very interesting things. And, it's some of these things, the AIL document that was mailed to the place he said he worked. Also, there's some weird things. Like, there's plenty also that I don't trust or believe in or think may have been exaggerated on purpose. Disinformation, possibly, to lead people away from, to make some of the real stuff seem a little less exciting, in a sense. I don't know. You never know what pressure, money, or something could do to somebody if they were put in a certain position, or even held that against them. Maybe he was coerced. But the point is that there are little clues here and there that are interesting. So, like, some of it's firsthand, but like when this guy told me he did something to a certain building, I know this scorch mark that he's talking about very well. So I'm like, I know this guy did that, so, but there's different people. Like, some people gave me a badge of somebody who used to work there, and he was a civilian, and this guy was cleaning their house. His wife said, do you want this stuff? What is this? And he said, well, my husband worked there, but he never wanted to talk about it. He was always cranky. He said, just don't even ask me about it. And I'm like, what did he do? He's a civilian employee. Why was he, like, so scared? Or what did he see as a civilian? It's just such a weird thing. But here is this actual physical thing that people are sending me pictures. And people that found tunnels last week sending me videos in there. So there's, like, some serious firsthand stuff that's legit with backing. And then there's stuff that's just pure rumor.
So you guys are still finding stuff out there?
Not only now, not only do I find stuff still, and I'm looking for certain things, but I have people just giving me stuff constantly. And I like turning off the flow of stuff so I can write this all up and share it. And that's not all of it too. I have my own research that I hold to a pretty good standard. Like, I put 260 sources in my book in the bibliography, and we're excited, like, legit good sources that you can follow, because I wanted to show those chapters have a lot of points that I'm trying to weave together. I think all together, it's like a circumstantial case. We're not going to find that direct evidence. I don't think anybody left anything really like that behind. But, there's a few things you could kind of hook together pretty good. Until I run out of those things to search and feel like I still have my work to do. But eventually I'm just going to sit back and look at it. And then maybe that's when something dawns on you after you really step back, It's possible.
It would be wild if you, I know it's pretty expensive, and I don't know how it would happen, but to get somebody out there with a drone to do LiDAR over the base, and help you find some of those like hatches and stuff like that have been overgrown, that you're probably walking by, throughout the years and not even know that they're there.
Yeah, that's funny. I actually was talking to somebody, a radar tech contacted me, and he's talking all about the SAGE system, and really, really intelligent in this field. But he actually does LiDAR mapping. Told me he could use, like, a DJI drone. And he said, instead of doing that, he was trying to help me. He said, instead of doing that, there might be existing data that he could just run through his software and pull apart and kind of help me with it. So I'm going to look into that. And it's kind of like a new version of what I used to dream about, having a ground penetrating radar. I even wrote that when we were kids. You know, we went with a guy who said he might have a friend with a cave finder, but instead, years later, I mentioned that when they were going on the history show, and they got these guys. They paid them a good amount of money. They were just at the paw of the Sphinx in Egypt before they came to Montauk, looking with a. So they brought it to Montauk, and on the show, they let me go, and they had me have dinner with them and talk about places we're going to do it, and then they let me watch. You know, I wasn't in that part of the show, but they let me go the whole day because they knew I was invested in it, and it meant a lot to me to watch. So that was really cool of them. And they did ground penetrating radar, magnetometer, Geiger counters, and the best thing was this thing called electronic resistivity imaging. And they hammered these spikes in like every couple feet.
Oh.
And then, you know, they got this slice down into the earth 60 feet right in front of the radar between the tunnel and there. And Chris Garitano is kind of like partially what his show, it was the follow-up to the Montauk Chronicles documentary, was this show called The Dark Files on History. So he agreed with me. We both said right here is the space. And they waited till the end of the day, you know, for TV. They did these other spots that one spot was where Al said there might be skeletons. So they did the cliffs. And then we did in front of the radar. And what we got down there was two giant structures, like 60 feet down, really long structures. And there was another one. It looked like it could have been an old tunnel that collapsed to the side of a staircase. But whatever it is, it just shows that there is indeed something there. Which is pretty cool to have something physical to look at. But yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's expensive. But now LiDAR is becoming so much, and even better than LiDAR. There's something, I think the Italians discovered it or created it. It's a technology called SAR. I think it's signature aperture radar or something like that. Specific aperture radar. I forget the acronym, but it's what they just supposedly found the structure under Giza pyramids. Was supposedly found with
bring
this.
that up.
Yeah, synthetic aperture radar. That's what it is. So
yeah, and that's still a thing. They're trying to figure out if that's actually real or not.
Yeah, you're right.
The Egyptian government's not going to let you dig under there to try to find it, of course. But
yeah,
I just watched the Montauk Chronicles last week.
Oh wow!
And I watched the other one like a month or so ago.
Oh wow! Okay.
And I'm just sitting here chomping at the bit, going, "Man, I really should have gone there. I really should have gone there and checked it out." And you know, they talk about, you know, they've got people that talk about, well, you know, I was one of the Montauk boys, and they fed us LSD and like the LSD house with the wallpaper, and they really messed with us. And then you've got, you know, talk of, well, there's a Montauk chair where we were able to time travel, and we were able to conjure up things and do all this craziness, and we sabotaged the computers. And I mean, it's such a wild, far-fetched story that, like you said, there's probably bits and pieces of truth in this story that has been kind of blown up a little bit just to kind of hide some of that truth. I mean, if our government can give a whole group of people in the military syphilis, you know, just to see what happens to them, how it affects them, our government's probably doing a bunch of really shitty things to people.
Basically, we do everything we can to try to figure out how to weaponize different things. I mean, we pretty much go to any length to check out that science and technology and see what we can do with it, I guess. I'm saying we, not that we know what's going on or okay with it, but as a whole, I guess, on our part of the fence here. But I mean, this place has been that kind of place where everybody's been a magnet. It's been a magnet to people, and many people do feel like they're involved. And in that show, when you were mentioning, all those clips you saw, the wallpaper and stuff, that was actually my footage, our footage, because I mean, who was my friend's father's camera or something? Who knows whose it was? But yeah, the camera, like
we go, we go camera.
Yeah,
you know.
At one point it was like camera, and then it started getting a little bigger again. I think those little Nokias were like But yeah, so this place has been there's been a lot of people who said that there's even Long Islanders who say they're involved, and they have their own kind of version of this story. That their stories haven't seen the light of day on the internet. So there's other people out there. I mean, altogether, that's how I look at it altogether. And you know, as far as going there, that was important part of you know, when you're looking into something, if you can, like you said, you regret, because it was hard. I mean, even from New York City, that would have been a heck of a trip to get out there all the way. Because even out here, it seems like the expressway ends, you know, and then you got to choose which peninsula you're going to drive down. But once you get there, it's really, there's like one road, maybe a back road secret, but it's pretty much you're stuck on that road until you get out there. You just got to go with it. So it might have been a really long trip for you, and who knows, you know, so don't regret it too much. And you can still always go and just check out the property one day.
Right. Yeah. If I ever win the lottery.
Because we used to have to park at the lighthouse and then walk like a mile into the basin and hide the whole way. And, you know, you probably would have had fun doing that too. But there was like all these barrels, you know, like toxic barrels. So we have videotaped like hundreds of them. I had buddies go over there and like open the lids and look in them. I'm like, don't do that, please. It's like green.
We had a thing happened in Vegas a couple of years ago, you know, because Vegas back in the 60s and 70s was ran by the mob.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. That's
so the you know, you always hear, oh, the story is if you cross the mob, they take you out in the desert and you're never seen again.
like casino.
Well, Lake Mead, the water level has dropped so drastically over the last 20 years that on one of the public beaches or near the public beaches, they found these barrels, these 5-gallon barrels, these these big 20, you know, big giant barrels, you know.
Oh, it's not good.
And so they called somebody to come out and deal with it, and they found bodies in them.
Oh,
so it was like a, you know, they thought, oh, this must be a mob thing. They must have, you know, at the point that the mob dumped these barrels in the water, there was 100-foot difference.
Wow.
Now there's not.
Yeah, that's what happens. Yeah,
Right.
That would be like the East River in New York or something like that. Yeah.
Right.
Like the Pine Barrens in Jersey or something.
So you brought up the Pine Barrens in Jersey. Have you ever? There's a whole story. This guy, I heard him on Art Bell, but it wasn't Art Bell. It was somebody else doing the show that time.
Ooh.
And I forget what his name was, but it was a whole thing called Ong's Hat.
Oh yeah, Ong's Hat.
You've heard of it?
I think Peter Moon wrote books about Ong's Hat too.
Yeah, and it was pretty wild. The guy was talking about it where it was another like time travel thing.
Yes, yeah.
Right? And they like created this egg or something. Anyway, if anybody wants to look it up, it's called Ong's Hat, ONGS Hat, and it was in the New Jersey Pine Barrens. But speaking of finding things, you found a reel of audio tape.
Yeah, yeah.
There. So what's the story on that?
Oh yeah, so it was our first year of YouTube, and within the first few months, few videos, we made friends with you know, still friends to this day, but friend Michael and Mike, my friend Long Island Bigfoot, Michael Colantonio, and Michael Roser is Dark Hour Paranormal. He did a whole documentary on. We did a couple, but one of the most recent ones, he interviewed a lot of people that felt that they were involved. So these guys, we were just going down the road, our first time ever hanging out, and Mike was a little ahead of us, and he just like looks down and finds this reel off the side of the road, kind of in the dirt, picks it up. There's like roots growing through it, and we were all freaking out, like, oh my god, you know, where'd this reel to reel come from? So over the next couple of years, I had sent it out to several conversion services, like the ones you see commercials for all the time, Memories, I forget the names, but I checked all of them, and I sent it out a few times, and they'd have it. They say, oh yeah, it's going good. Then they'd send it back to me and say, sorry, we can't do anything with it. So eventually I get this weird like $25 on PayPal with somebody asking to send me a message. I talked to these guys, total strangers. They wanted to like do an interview with me and help me with the reel. So they wanted me to meet in Queensbridge housing projects. I'm like, this is where Mobb Deep is from, and Nas. I'm like, yeah, it's not the best neighborhood. I'm thinking they're like, we'll be in a white van. I'm like, all right, these guys are like going to tase me or something. So I made up a BS story. I was like, yeah, my car, you know, I just made something up, and I usually don't do that, but in this case I did, and I'll own it. And then then we got into an argument, like a screaming match, and I said, listen, I still want to find out what's on this, and you want to do your thing. I said, let's just be grown-ups and let's just do this. And so then they picked me up here and drove me to Brooklyn, and they hired an audio guy. He brought a machine where we can convert the reel. We carried this thing down the street in Brooklyn up into the studio, and then we played the reel, and we got it working after like however long. I mean, the guy was kind of an amateur too. It may have been flipped or backwards, but we started getting recording it, and they were supposed to give me this recording, which they never did. They kind of jerked me around, and they said our mics were hot, the lapels, and I said, I don't care. I could listen through our conversation. I just want to hear what's on it. They still never gave it to me, which luckily I took my GoPro and I put it in the headphones and I recorded a small piece of it, which is all I have. Then when they dropped me off at home, they made sure to record my entire car with spotlights to make sure that I really had damage on my car, which I did. It was from something else. But I thought, whatever. I probably just rode with some intelligence agency people, but we both wanted to know what was on it or whatever, and that's what I figured out. So whatever. I guess I'm not sure. So
you still have the tape?
I have the reel, and then I had a subscriber give me a machine, a perfectly nice, beautiful machine. So I'm going to try to attempt to do it myself. But since then, I was busy, with the book and all these things, and also I want to make sure I know what I'm doing before I attempt it. So I've been. Right. The video there were so many comments where people were giving me helpful tips, how to clean it, so I'm going to have to study it, write them down and go through the whole, but I am going to do it and I will share it.
Yeah. It's pretty wild that thing's just laying out there and you were able to get anything off of it.
It really is.
Audio tape is just so fragile. And I know when some of these bands go and they re-release their music and they go direct from the masters, or we have to do this and that. They have to put the tape in an oven.
Yeah, bake
it. And then they only get like 1 or 2 good passes on a machine before the tape's garbage again.
It blows into dust. Yeah.
Right. So I'm just amazed that that tape even survived going through that machine. I saw a piece of the video. So I'm just amazed that tape even survived going through the machine.
Did you see the pile of dirt that was left on the thing after it was played? I mean, we banged it out. We cleaned it so many times, but there was still, caked in there.
Yeah, you're probably going to get 1 or 2 good passes out of that thing. Yeah. And when on the audio, on the video, it does sound backwards.
Yeah, it does. I think it's a Bing Crosby song, but the weird part, it's called Sam's song. Not Samsung, and it was like one of the first kind of like a rap song back then, which before like hip hop or before bebop. Right. It's like, but it was interesting that was just a piece of it. But there was something on that show, the Y-Files, who's actually been digging into Art's old shows lately and using a lot of the time travel. He's really doing a good job of kind of cooking down the stories and recapping them, and always recommending Art shows. But what he did there was. He was talking about the CIA was doing this study where every 30 seconds, when we speak, we say something backwards. That's kind of like your true intentions.
Oh yeah, the reverse speech.
Yeah. So like we do it subconsciously about every 30 seconds. And you ever you hear yourself talking sometimes, you might say a word that's not quite pronounced right or like doesn't come out right. And that's actually that part. So they'll take any speech, like say the speech Kennedy gave when we landed on the moon. And in about every 30 seconds, you hear this phrase. So that's what I was looking at in the reel. We got 3 phrases in that short period that seemed to say, don't drink the water, give your blood or something. And there was another one. But, we were like, those are clearly forward, but the rest is maybe the tape is flipped.
Right.
Who knows how it was supposed to play. So then Air Force signals electronic warfare specialist, he's retired, but he told me, these reels, we used to use them in air defense and everything. And you see them in all the old pictures on the wall, the reel-to-reel recorders. But he said, those are sometimes the guys were bored and they put music on because you can record. We used RF, he says, and you can put audio on them and RF. And if you're playing the audio, you can't tell there's RF. And if you're just looking at the RF signals, the data, you cannot tell there's audio. And he said, so these guys had recording these reels and they would put music on them sometimes if they were just like had a long shift. And so that was another option. But he said, even if it's not music because they're bored, even if this was something else, you may want to look for hidden RF data. And I was like, oh, interesting. So
yeah, I wouldn't even know how you would find that.
I never heard of it, but I thought that was really interesting. I looked it up. It's legit. So I get these, that's what I'm saying. I get these cool, like the coolest thing about this is that this topic is bringing me people from every aspect of life. Like, it could be a fisherman or young professionals or a radar tech or a veteran or an urban explorer, a graffiti writer, every kind of person, and they all have different kinds of stories. So I take it all in because I think it's fascinating. And then I will stop at one point because I feel like, you don't want to keep looking, and I want to make sure I share what I have first. But the story will always be interesting to me, I'm sure.
It's always going to be interesting to me. Even when I go back and I listen to, the old Art Bell shows with Preston, and I'm sitting there listening to it, and I have no idea what he's talking, because they get very technical.
Yeah.
And he's talking about, having a bunch of the old equipment, and it blows my mind because it's so far fetched.
Yes.
And you're just like, oh man, this is killer. This is, they should have made a movie about this. Well, then we get Stranger Things.
That's exactly, yeah.
But
it's funny. The Disney is in not encroaching, but they're dancing around this too. Marvel Comics, Loki's time traveling, Thor's brother, but also he's the Philadelphia experiment, DE-173, the USS Eldridge came crashing through the time portal in Loki. They had the actual Eldridge in the show because Stranger Things kind of made it so they can't use Montauk, the name. By choosing this other name, now they've kind of eliminated using these real terms, but Disney hasn't. So now they can go, and because Universal has a Stranger Things ride, there was Stranger Things on Broadway. So I mean, Disney did Loki, and then Morbius, the Marvel Comics vampire. That was in the movie. It says off the coast of Montauk, and they're talking about Plum Island. So Morbius was on Plum Island, essentially, just like Hannibal Lecter in Silence of the Lambs. He was on Plum Island. He says that in the show. They brought Hannibal Lecter to Plum Island, and actually they were going to make Plum Island a maximum security prison at first before they chose it for this biological lab. So it's pretty interesting. It's been in popular culture a lot. In fact, there's a really famous episode of Seinfeld called The Hamptons, and that's where George gets like shrinkage or whatever. And I don't know if you saw that one. Okay, so that's filmed in a bunker for Camp Hero. It's one of the satellite bunkers. And this house, they converted into a luxury home instead of like others have just fell apart or been knocked over. This one has like the slit windows near the roof line so you can look out over the ocean. And it's literally got like a cement tower inside with a rung ladder, but they made it into this home, and that's where they filmed Seinfeld. So,
oh geez,
I
had no idea. It was cold.
Yeah, right? Yeah, that's the one. Yep. So Camp Hero finds its way into so many things. It's actually pretty amazing.
So you wrote the book, and so where can people find the book? I know that the Kindle version's on Amazon. Where can we find the book? Where can people order the book?
Okay, so the physical copy you could only get from the publisher. It's bookbaby.com, and it's it's about 5 pounds. It's it's like a full on textbook. So it's $40, and it's loaded with documents, pictures, everything. The site is called bookbaby.com, and the book is called Montauk is Strange, and it's under my name, Brian E. Minnick. So this is what it looks like with the radar on the cover.
There it is, the radar tower.
Yep. Like you said, it's the iconic, symbol for Montauk itself at this point. And then the ebook you can find on any ebook store. But for now, the only way to get the physical like textbook coffee table book is on BookBaby.
Okay.
And then you can find me on YouTube and Instagram for pictures and YouTube for videos.
Yeah, I saw the YouTube channel was Montauk is Strange, right?
Yep.
So it's the same thing. Yep. Montauk is Strange, and there you've got the video of finding the audio reel. And,
yep. Yeah, there's 300 videos. Some are from the 90s, and they got a couple little mini documentaries. A lot are just exploring, a couple music kind of videos, but they're all mixed up.
Right.
A lot of collaborations in there too with other people.
Okay.
And, plan on doing more.
Bookbaby.com, and you said that's like a volume 1 without saying volume 1, right? You said you're working on a second volume.
Yeah, the other half of this, basically, like to conclude a lot of the ideas and my research and all this stuff that I got recently, and all the stuff I didn't put in this one because of like overflow size and
Right.
yeah. So this will be the second half. I'm hoping to have it done by the end of the year. I gave myself the deadline, when that Stranger Things comes out. It's always been my deadline.
Oh, right.
To get this stuff out, just to force myself to get it done.
Yeah. That's always tough. It's like you got to give yourself a deadline. So how many pages are in the book that you've done already?
This one's like about 420, maybe a little more.
That's a heavy duty book right there with tons of pictures and stuff I saw as you were fanning through it.
Yeah.
So it's definitely worth it for anybody who wants to know more about Montauk and really dive into, not just the Montauk experiment, but just Camp Hero in general. And did you include blueprints and stuff in there?
I got maps, blueprints. Like I have all the maps in chronological order over the years. I got blueprints, documents, formerly top secret documents, a full military history that I did just for like facts, and all kinds of blueprints, like several pages of. There's a document that went to the White House about the UFOs over Montauk, and three image galleries. One's for history, one's for our explorations, and one's for the chapters. There's a whole bunch of different sections. It's not like usual books, so it's not in order. It's kind of just filled.
It's like a reference.
It's kind of like a reference, and you could read it too. So it's got a little of everything, and the other half will have just as much.
Right. So bookbaby.com for your book. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
And then obviously you're on Facebook or you're on Twitter and.
No, just Facebook. I didn't set up I still have a couple, things to make. I was thinking of setting up more, but I have just for now, I have the Facebook page is like my personal, but I do have a book page. You're welcome to contact me there. Instagram is where I put most of my photography. You can contact me there, YouTube and the book. And that's pretty much it. I do a lot of shows. I usually don't do any interview type shows on our channel. I haven't yet. I'm not against it. I usually do them on other people's channels, and that's it. Try to work with as many people as possible.
Right. And I appreciate you taking your time with me because I am just fascinated with this whole thing.
No, but thanks for having me. It's been a great conversation.
And I'm gonna order the book and have one sent out to me. And absolutely. And again, Brian, thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with me today.
Thanks, John.
Let's do it again when you get that second book out. That'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna go on Facebook here in a minute, and I'm gonna steer everybody towards your YouTube channel so they can see all the videos and see some of the stuff we're talking about.
Thank you.
I didn't want to clip anything and put any videos in this because it's just, I didn't want your videos are meant to be the whole package, and taking bits and pieces kind of takes away from it. Yeah. So I'm going to steer everybody towards that. I'll put up the link to the book and link to the Kindle version of the book on Amazon and everything. Awesome. And hopefully, man, we'll get some book sales out of this for you. And I'm looking forward to getting the book and diving into it. And then I'm really looking forward to part 2.
Awesome. Thank you, man. I really appreciate the support and just having me on talking and, putting whatever I do sell right back in to make sure the second one gets done no matter what. And I'm on it. I'm going to keep doing it. And I'll be happy to let you know right away and send you one even.
Okay. Hey, and if I do end up making it out that way, I'm going to call you and I'll tell you what, I'll drive. So you don't have to deal with the traffic. You just got to sit in the passenger seat. I'll drive.
No problem. I'm sure you want to come down. We'll gladly go with you.
You're like, oh yeah, dude. As long as you drive, we're good. We're money. So
that works.
All right, Brian, dude. I appreciate it, man. You have a great day. And like I said, this will be available on YouTube. It's on Facebook right now, and I'll put up the audio version, which will be available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well.
Oh, very cool.
So, all right, my friend.
Have a good day. And
you too, man. Take care. Enjoy your holiday, sir.
Yes, you too.
All right. Take care.
All right, take care.
All right. Take care. All right. There we go. Brian Minnick with Montauk is Strange. If you go to YouTube, he's got the channel Montauk is Strange on YouTube. Go there, check it out. He's got videos on there. His early exploration videos are on there. He's got videos where they find the audio tape, where they're exploring the tunnels that they found and everything. If you want more visual documentation of what we've been talking about, the Montauk is Strange channel on YouTube. Again, Brian is also on Facebook, and he's got that book, which is available at bookbaby.com. It's $40, but it's over 400 pages. I mean, think about that. That's like 10 cents a page. Come on, you can do that. What is that? That's roughly $40. That's probably about 7 Starbucks coffees. You can do that. You can buy his book. Come on. That's a week worth of Starbucks coffees you can give up for Brian's book. Support him. He's put a lot of work into this book. Speaking of support, you're watching this on Facebook. There's the Ear Mob Podcast with Chaz Stumbo Facebook page. That we're on Twitter, we're on YouTube, we're on Rumble. I've got to pull this video, put it on Rumble. Do me a favor, go there and hit the subscribe button. I know I've got a few subscribers on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. Tell your friends, even if you only were able to watch for a little bit and like what you saw, all that support matters. Tell your friends. If you've got a subject you want me to talk about, let me know. I'll talk about it. I love talking about everything. So it doesn't matter, man. Let's do this. So again, here we go. Thank you to Brian Minnick for coming on the show. I've got some other cool stuff. I'm doing a show tomorrow morning with Todd Bates. He runs a website on EVP. It's EVP Exploration. Go there and check it out. He's on Facebook as well. He's got some free classes on the website on how to listen for EVPs and process your audio and what constitutes an actual EVP over some, what could be interference. Go take his classes. He's doing a show today at 6 p.m. He's doing a live show at 6 p.m. Support him. I'm recording an episode with him tomorrow at 8 in the morning. I believe we're doing it. So I'll be live at 8 o'clock in the morning tomorrow, if I can get my ass out of bed. Anyways, again, thank you, Brian. Thank you to whoever watched. Thank you for supporting the show. Please go to Facebook and please go to YouTube and hit that subscribe and like button and that notification bell. So when I do this, you will see me doing it. And again, until tomorrow, when we do the next episode, you guys have a great day. Take care.
You just listened to the Ear Mob Podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow.